Russian President Putin confirmed that the dynamic of the special military operation is completely positive and everything is going on in the natural course within the framework of the plan of the Russian. The Army General Staff this morning, it is preparing to launch a large-scale military attack, and the Russian army is advancing in Bakhmut from several axes. And the American press calls for a speedy retreat and escape from Bakhmut, to ensure that the Soledar disaster will not be repeated. Russian President Putin declares that the dynamic of the special military operation is positive and everything is developing within the framework of the plan of the Russian Ministry of Defense in an interview with journalist Phil Zarub in Moscow. The terminology used, such as dynamic. This means that the Russian military plan is neither fixed nor rigid, but rather a very flexible Russian plan that is modified and developed by the situation of war and fighting on the fronts. Russia applies a very important military principle called flexibility in the plan, which is based on the importance of adapting to the emergency and developing new plans, starting new tactics commensurate with the course of combat situations. Setting new goals according to the variables on the battlefield is called the principle of flexibility in the plan. Sometimes the army enters a war with specific goals to implement, then it is surprised that a problem has occurred, so the army begins to develop its tactics and adopt completely new goals that differ from its first goals, and it begins to change strategies and ideas that are commensurate with the changes in the battlefield. Russia changes its objectives depending on the variables. Russia rushed to resolve the war quickly, and there was no plan to destroy Ukraine. But it was surprising that it was fighting the entire NATO alliance. And they are generating pressure on Zelensky not to negotiate with Russia. Putin adopted a new plan for the war in Ukraine as a whole, and from here Russia began to slow down and delay resolving the war to drain NATO for as long as possible. And the war turned from a tactical war to a strategic one. With the start of the war in the new year 2023, Russia began to increase military pressure on NATO in Ukraine, and new weapons began to operate with a completely different tactic by focusing on bombing infrastructure facilities. With each period new targets appear, and Russian tactics are developed. This is the dynamic of war. Putin says that all developments are within the framework of the Russian army's plan, that sending major weapons will not change the military situation, and that Russia will take charge. Russia will advance and implement its full objectives. The Russian Ministry of Defense confirmed that the massive missile strike that targeted Ukraine on January 14 destroyed all specific targets and carried out its objectives with complete accuracy. Despite Ukraine's announcement of repelling several Russian missiles in an attempt to gain and polish the failed Western air defense systems, to ensure that Zelensky takes new weapons from the West. Russia's missiles destroyed thermal power stations for the first time, which caused a decline in Ukraine's ability to generate electricity, and also caused an increase in the electricity problem in Ukraine. The Russian army forces are advancing in Bakhmut from several axes and taking control of new areas in the strategic city of Bakhmut. Russian Wagner forces stormed Bakhmut from Patrice Lumumba Street in the east of the city. The Russian army forces attacked also Bakhmut from the south and southeast areas and Istiklal Street. Another attack stormed Bakhmut along the right bank of the Bakhmulka River, meaning a comprehensive Russian attack from multiple directions and the application of the pincer strategy to besiege the Ukrainian forces and NATO mercenaries and isolate the city from any supply or logistical support. After Russia took control of the city of Soledar, neighboring towns and highways link Soledar to Bakhmut, the American press issues a serious warning of the need for Ukrainian forces to leave Bakhmut as soon as possible to save Ukrainian soldiers from captivity or killing. Ukraine has lost about 5 entire brigades in the Soledar battles, with hundreds of members of the special forces from the elite forces that were trained in Britain. It means a matter of time.